get an early start in their career without knowing exactly what they want to do yet, but having some time to explore and figure out really exactly what it is that they want.
Good evening, everyone. It's Vrushangi Shah with the Fellowship Review through the American Journal of Healthcare Strategy. I am so excited to connect with Jessi Tran today for our episode. Jessi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that this is my second time on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome back. I think it's always great to touch base with people who are now, out of their fellowship and have experienced being an early careerist. So I'm excited to dig in. But for our new listeners or those who may not have gotten to your episode previously, would you please give us a brief background on where you're from, where you are now, and kind of your educational journey so far?
Yeah, of course. So, again, I'm Jessi Tran. I'm originally from Kentucky. I went to University of Kentucky for my undergrad. I studied clinical leadership and management. Right after undergrad, I went to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where I pursued my MHA. Right after my MHA, I got a fellowship at WellStar Health Systems. I was the hospital operations fellow at North Fulton Medical Center. And I am now, I think, around 2 months post fellowship, and I've been an operations manager since then.
What a nice journey and great institutions and a very unique major in your undergrad. So props for that. But let's take a step back and first talk about your graduate school journey. Of course, Chapel Hill, such a great campus and area to be in. What maybe made you pick UNC Chapel Hill, and moreover, what was that experience like for you overall?
Honestly, truly, I never had any intention of leaving Kentucky. And I'm going to give a shout out to the University of Kentucky MHA program as well. They're growing very rapidly and doing really well. But I thought that I wanted to stay in Kentucky, but I felt like I needed a change. I didn't know what, but I felt like a great way to get a different perspective, a change of scenery, if you will, was to look into other programs outside of Kentucky. That's when I came across UNC. I was just honestly researching MHA programs, and I made a list, and I got to talk to some alumni. I even talked to a lot of mentors about where I wanted to go, and I actually only applied to UNC. That was very risky. I didn't even have the time to really tour it because by the time I made the decision that I wanted to apply, it was cutting it really close. So I kind of just left it to the universe, which I don't recommend doing for everything, but it worked out in my favor. I only applied to UNC's program. I had a great interview experience. The faculty and the first year MHA student who interviewed me were phenomenal. I felt like I showed up as myself. I honestly felt like I had nothing to lose. And I was just myself. And then from then, I even remember this. I bought a UNC sweatshirt right after my interview just to put it out there into the universe. And I got in. And I'm so glad that I did. It was a huge change for me, packing up my whole life and moving to a new state where I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends or family. In fact, the first week I moved to North Carolina, it was before orientation. So the only human contact I had was with other cashiers at Home Goods as I was trying to decorate my apartment. But it's honestly crazy. As I'm talking about it, reflecting on it now, seeing where I am now, that was such a crucial part in my adaptability skills. And it kind of shows that these skills kind of show up in very different ways throughout your life, whether it's professional or personal.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's meant to be is meant to be. So you obviously found a home for yourself at UNC Chapel Hill. A huge part of graduate schools is also kind of the extracurriculars you're
Mhm.
involved in, as well as the graduate administrative internship. So tell our listeners kind of where you landed for your administrative internship and kind of what made you choose that organization and what that process was like kind of landing, because it can be a stressful time trying to find an internship while being in grad school.
Yes, it was a very stressful time. I remember it very clearly. I think it was like March and I hadn't landed an internship yet. And I was getting very nervous. I can't even tell you how many I applied to because I applied to them all, honestly. Um, I came across WellStar because we had our director of our program. He had a really good relationship with our chief of staff, and I guess our WellStar was just starting their internship program was still pretty new. I think I was the second or third cohort of interns,
Wow.
maybe. And the idea behind the design of the internship was that it was kind of like a 10-week interview, for you to get exposure to WellStar and their practices to see if you would pursue a fellowship. I had no intention of doing a fellowship. I met with again, another great interview experience. A fellow interviewed me for the internship. And again, it was just like, it was a repeat. It was where I showed up as myself. I kind of just put it out into the universe. And I guess they really liked me. And I guess being myself, being my authentic self, really works in my favor. So I don't know. I just remember it being a great conversation. I didn't feel like I was being interviewed. I did take the opportunity to highlight, my skills and my experiences. But overall, I just felt like the interviewer just wanted to get to know me like as a person as well. And I was very much embraced during my internship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'd love to call out to anyone who's listening is the value of being authentic
Mhm.
and just carrying your true authentic self. Things tend to fall in line and in place when you really carry a version of yourself that is really true to who you are.
Mhm.
So just a little bit of my tidbit. Um, any project or any part of the internship that was really unique that you'd want to highlight, or really something that had an impact on you during those 10 weeks?
I have a very funny story, I guess. One of the biggest projects that I did was I worked with a director of practice operations on a scorecard. It was this massive Excel workbook that was for each primary care practice would have their own like Excel workbook. At the time, we were using a different system, but it wasn't very user friendly. So the director that I was working with, she was like, "How do we simplify this to make it like a one-stop shop where it's like a good summary that you could just look at whenever you wanted, especially for practice managers?" So I created multiple giant, very detailed Excel workbooks. It was crazy. It was like stuff was feeding into each other. I was definitely utilizing my Excel skills for this. I even pulled an all-nighter the night before the last day of my internship because it just so happened that my very last day of my internship was the day that I was going to present this giant project to all of the practice managers. It was going to be a huge deal. And I was so excited because it was going to be such a nice like bow to the end of my internship. So I pulled an all-nighter because I really, really wanted to get it done, only to be around like 6 a.m. I saw the director I was working with. She was also online and she was like helping me with doing like the final touches. And then I go to the meeting place around 8 a.m. I open my laptop, everything's gone. Everything that I had worked on in the past, probably like 24, like 36 hours, wiped. It was gone. And I panicked. I called the IT representative immediately and I was like, "Hey, this is what's happening. Like, can you help me?" A few minutes later, I got a call back and he told me, "I have bad news. Um, Essentially, my access got shut down 12 hours earlier, because then my like official end date of my internship. So my licensing for like Microsoft Excel got taken away. So I basically like it just everything just like stopped, and I was just kind of like working in limbo, I guess. And I was absolutely devastated. And he was explaining to me, he was like, there was no way you could have known, and there's no way to recover it even with like our backup, and there's like nothing that you can really do at this point to retrieve it, and it wasn't even your fault. And he was very kind, but I was absolutely devastated. And I walked into the room to talk to like my director, and I was like, I have bad news. And I felt terrible having to like tell her this. And after I explained her what happened, she was like, oh, it's okay, it'll be fine, we'll just carry on, and we'll just delay like the actual launch, like we'll just train everybody today, and we'll just tell them that they'll have their workbook later. And I was like, really? Like, are you sure? Like, I feel bad, I'm leaving the internship, I can. And she's like, Jessi, these things happen. It was a technical difficulty. There was nothing that you could do about it. We will be okay, and we will move on. And what I want to say something corny and cheesy that I learned from that day, but honestly, what I really learned was making sure that I have a Microsoft license as I'm working on my projects. But truly, I think that being met with grace and empathy from my director, and her kind of meeting me where I was, and just giving me so much grace, and I don't know, like just that could have, I don't know, sent me elsewhere. Like I don't know, they could have set my mind elsewhere. I could have felt like I failed, but I didn't. And I was scared that it had like an impact on my any considerations for like the fellowship, but it didn't. And I don't know, it's like my one of the biggest failure that I had in my internship, but also I guess my greatest achievement because I learned so much from it.
Yeah, absolutely. What a stressful experience. But what I actually want to draw attention to is the value of a good leader. You said it yourself, someone who met you where you were, who didn't yell at you
Mhm.
or, penalize you for something that wasn't your fault. I think kudos to whoever this director was, because, that the actions of and then the reaction was what kind of set your trajectory. I think this experience should teach all of us that it's okay to make mistakes, and to have a leader that's going to be accepting of the fact that life happens or technical glitches happen, but let you grow from there, is a great sign of a good mentor. So thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry that that was your experience. How unfortunate. Um, and you kind of stayed WellStar through and through. So talk us through your, moving right on. You graduate, you finish your
Mhm.
internship, and then you're like, I'm going to do the fellowship. So, what was the fellowship process like for you, interviewing, finally landing one? And just looking back, what made you pick WellStar and come back to the
Mhm.
organization?
So when I finally decided at the end of my internship, I was like, I drink the Kool-Aid. I'm gonna do a fellowship. I knew for sure I was gonna apply to WellStar, but I was also thinking I don't want to put all of my eggs in one basket. And I also
Mhm.
wanted to explore. I'm like, what if there's something somewhere else that I wanted to go, or where I would be a good fit as well. I probably applied to around 15 to 18. I lost count, honestly. There's an Excel sheet floating somewhere with every place that I applied to. But I was also very strategic of where I wanted to apply. I did some networking, talking to former fellows, talking to current fellows as well. And honestly, fellowship season, it's all a blur to me because I forgot I was a student for a second. But honestly, like our professors were just very supportive of us, going to interviews and prepping, and giving us resources to do so. It was honestly a very stressful time because I was I was I was being interviewed, but I was also interviewing the organization as well. And I was just, I don't know. Every interview was different. Was different. I was like trying to connect all the dots in my head. I'm like, what do I like? What do I don't like? What was a red flag? What was a green flag? What was a beige flag for me, honestly? And where do I want to be? What kind of people do I want to surround myself with? Who is my preceptor going to be? So it was just a lot up in the air with every interview that I did, whether it was virtual, whether it was in person. It was all a good experience nonetheless. But when I went to WellStar, and I truly did not think that I was automatically going to get a first and second round just because I was an intern. I just hoped that I made a good enough impression during the fellowship and during the first round interview in order to make it to on sites. When I went on site, it was like, in a weird way, like coming home. I wasn't nervous. It was at the corporate office where I spent all summer. I even went to like my old office and like took a peek. It was like emptied out. Said hello to some of my, favorite workers and employees and all kinds of people that I met, and they were excited to like see me again after like 2 months. Like that was, I don't know, it was just really nice. And once again, like the people who interviewed me, I was just myself, and I was just Jessi. I just like talked and talked. I probably talked a lot because I was still nervous. But I feel like everyone at WellStar, everyone is different. Everyone operates differently, but there is a very commonality among like WellStar employees. You can really see it. You can really feel it when like you meet somebody from WellStar. They're very welcoming and opening and nurturing, and also the preceptors that were chosen for the fellowship program stood out to me as well. And John Paul, my former preceptor, he actually didn't interview me, but he made sure that I had a phone call with him before I made my decision to accept.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's incredible. And I think, you know, that feeling of coming home is so important. And
Mhm.
some people can do their internship in a place and then apply there for a future opportunity and feel like they came home.
Mhm.
Others may interview at a place and it just feels like home right from the
Mhm.
get-go. So I'm so happy you were able to find that. So now, for people who are interested in WellStar, would you be able to give a background on just the logistics of the fellowship itself? Is it 1 year, 2 year, project based, rotation based? Are there multiple fellows? Was it just you? Kind of just the behind the scenes a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So WellStar offers four different tracks for our fellowship program. So you will be in a cohort. We have service line, operations, WellStar Medical Group, and corporate. That might change year to year depending on what the needs of the organization are. Sometimes we take on a couple more, sometimes a couple less. It just depends, truly. But it but you are not limited in your tracks. You can, branch out and explore other avenues. Like for example, I did a corporate project, but anyway, you like I said, you are in a cohort. It's a year long. It's project based, and what I love about WellStar's fellowship program is that ask and you shall receive. So if you want it to be rotational, you can make it rotational if you wanted to. But majority of my fellowship, I for the first 6 months I spent time rounding in every department, and then the second half was very project heavy, and you will also maybe get an opportunity to do a big project as a fellowship cohort as well, which is super fun.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And were you able to have that opportunity to do a cohort project during your fellowship?
We started one. Unfortunately, we didn't get to finish it, and we passed it on. But again, it was just nice to spend time with my cohort.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I usually ask, like when people tell me on this show that they have co-fellows, that's my next question, but you kind of answered it before I could even ask of like, is there opportunity to mingle with your cohort of fellows, and is that an option for the fellowship? So it's so great that, you know, Wellstar gives their fellows not only to establish an individual identity, but then also do a cohort project and really like get into that group project space again. And I kind of also want to ask, you know, you stayed at Wellstar and retention post fellowship is something that's talked about a lot. So, what is it that you do now? What's your role? What are some of the projects or initiatives that you're handling, and what about that excites you the most?
Yeah, I'm so excited that Wellstar wanted me to stay or asked me to stay. So, as an operations manager at North Fulton, I'm fairly new to my role. So, I'm kind of getting like integrated in. So far, I've done a lot of work with our facilities director. I've been learning a lot about construction, kind of doing a lot of coordinating in the background for any like renovations that we're doing, taking a look at like the master plan, also planning out for 5, 10 years. Maybe we'll get a tower, who knows? But I'm learning a lot about like design, everything that goes into like construction and space planning, truly at the hospital, and just like the day to day things that our maintenance staff has to go through, and how to kind of streamline it, make it more be more proactive about PMs and equipment and all kinds of things. Our hospital is growing, bursting at the seams. We are really high and we're growing in volume, but our space has remained the same for the past 40 years, probably. So just navigating that. I'm also just still doing some data analytics for the senior team still, just kind of hanging on to them a little bit longer as I'm transitioning into my new role as a manager. But honestly, like my mentor told me, my first year as a manager, I'm honestly still learning. And as my role develops and grows, I think that I will be dealing with a lot more quality and safety, and hopefully credentialing, and just getting North Fulton in a good spot, and doing what I can to support our staff, especially our frontline staff, and just let nurses be nurses, doctors be doctors, and do everything else in the background, basically. I would describe myself right now as like the catch all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what a great role to have, right? Because you get a lot of experience and exposure early on in your career. And then speaking of kind of career and being an early careerist, how have you stayed involved now that you're, in any groups or any kind of platforms post, graduate school, to kind of stay up to date and connected to other fellows around the country or other early careerists?
Yeah, so I'm actually a part of an organization called the National Administrative Fellowship Network, or I call it NAFN for short. But it's essentially an organization full of former fellows that are on the advisory board, and also current fellows that serve as a regional chair capacity, a way for all of the fellows all over the country to like connect, collaborate, support each other, talk about our experiences, and we also host events and such. But it's just a great way to stay connected, and just giving kind of mentoring incoming fellows, and as well as mentoring students who are interested in fellowships, because I think fellowships they're getting so a nice reputation these days. I feel like more and more students are seeing that as a way to kind of get an early start in their career without knowing exactly what they want to do yet, but having some time to explore and figure out really exactly what it is that they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you highlighting that, right? Because it's in school, there's a lot of like natural flow to the organizations and extracurriculars that we are a part of. And
Mhm.
a lot of the times, after you start your full time role, whether that's a fellowship or a post fellowship role, it's hard to stay involved. And so, because I knew that about you, I really wanted our listeners to also know that there are extracurriculars and activities outside of work to stay connected to fellows and other early careerists who may have similar interests. So thank you for highlighting that. And, that's a group. Of course, there's a LinkedIn page. When I did my fellowship 2.5 years ago now at this point, I also joined it just to be connected with other fellows. And so our listeners, I urge you guys, if you're a fellow, former or current, to definitely go look at their LinkedIn page as well. And every episode, there are two standard questions, no matter what, that I love to ask my guests. And so first, I'll start with, when people do fellowships, when people are applying to such a competitive space, oftentimes they have to leave their hometown or
Mhm.
leave the familiar nature of whatever part of the country they grew up in to then go to a new state. And of course, you did that for grad school, but then you also did that for fellowship. So, for those that are interested in WellStar, what would you want to share? Maybe something surprising or something you love about living in Georgia, and kind of what that experience has been like, especially after growing up in Kentucky and then living in North Carolina for a while.
Yeah, so living in Georgia is very different from Kentucky and North Carolina. Being closer to the city, living in Atlanta, I can honestly say I love it here. It does get really hot, really,
Yeah.
really hot, like unbearable. I've gone through two Georgia summers now, and it still gets me. But I just love the culture here. I've also gotten involved with the community in various ways. And I can honestly say I really haven't been to a chain restaurant except for Olive Garden, except for Olive Garden. But just there's so much like culture. There's always something to do, always something to see, and it was just really refreshing with this new change of scenery.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing that because, again, it's one of those parts of the country that either you're from there or your job will take you there. So it's good to know that you've had a positive experience despite the heat, but it's good that you've had a positive experience. And I think kind of what I love to end on, and so same question for you that I'd love to kind of end on is looking back at your fellowship journey, because of course this is the fellowship review. What is something about the fellowship cycle that was a lesson learned or something you do differently, or advice that you'd give kind of your younger self in that sense of, oh, I should have been mindful of this?
I think I wish I would have been more sorry, I wish I would have been less harsh on myself. Because with every rejection, I should have kind of thought to myself like, but I made it to the second round. But I did a
Yeah.
first round. I made it there. I made it to that point at least, and I got to where I am now because of it. Everything was a learning experience. It was exposure. It was practice. Um, it was also just developing skills on identifying what my values were and what I wanted out of another organization. So as corny as it sounds, I would just say like be present, be in the moment, soak it in, celebrate the small wins. Um, give yourself a lot of grace,
Yes.
honestly, and it will be okay. You will end up where you belong. Not only that, but you will also build your village that will support you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What good advice. And I think kind of what I want to echo out of all the valuable things that you said, not only during the episode, but during this last segment, is give yourself grace. I agree with that so much. I feel like the fellowship cycle is a roller coaster, and every day comes with new opportunities, but also rejections. But I do believe, rejection is redirection. So it's really important to be patient with yourself and know that something will work out and what's meant for you is going to find you. So I really appreciate you highlighting that valuable advice. And Jessi, it's been so amazing having you back on. Of course, last time you were with our previous host, but I'm glad I had the privilege of interviewing you now that you're out of your fellowship in a manager role. Thank you so much for your time this evening and just all the valuable stories and lessons that you shared with our listeners.
Thank you so much.